Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Deep Fried Gaming channel. Earlier this year, Resident Evil Requiem was released to widespread acclaim from both critics and even the common folk. That's you and me. It was praised for being another very solid entry into the newest trilogy of mainline first-person Resident Evil titles. The first-person sections with Grace in the first half of the game are perhaps some of the best that have been offered up in all of Resident Evil's newest entries. With the release of Requiem, however, as is normally the case, capital D discourse began to spring up on the hairy underhole of the internet known as Twitter. This discourse revolved around gatekeeping, Resident Evil tourism, and the suggestion that the Resident Evil fan base is filled to the brim with folks who literally don't even play the games, opting instead to simply watch their favorite streamers play them. Here's the truth. I've never watched a streamer play through a Resident Evil game, but I am a tourist. It was a series that was almost entirely out of my interest and off my radar until the buzz around Resident Evil 7 began nearly a decade ago. This was my entry into the series, and I loved it. I still love RE7 and the correction and fresh direction that it brought to the franchise. Since 7, I've played 8, 9, and the 2 and 3 remakes. It's embarrassing, and with that kind of a history with the franchise, you can understand why it would be hard to honestly call myself a fan. It's sort of like calling yourself a big fan of a band when you only know their 4 biggest hits. With this realization, I have come to the understanding that my only recourse is to do what Twitter has apparently never done, and play all of the mainline Resident Evil titles. What you're watching now is the beginning of that journey, starting with, of course, Resident Evil 1.
Resident Evil.
Now, when I say Resident Evil 1, just to be clear, I am not talking about the remake of 1, which does exist. I'm talking about the OG. On screen are the games I plan to tackle. By the end of my exploration, I plan to be a seasoned Resident Evil Zoomer scholar who can identify every highly niche engagement vague post that makes its way across my timeline. But that's far more than enough rambling, so let's get on into Resident Evil 1 from 1996. Resident Evil 1 stands as a juggernaut of influence in the survival horror space. It's widely credited for doing with the survival horror genre what Halo did for the first-person shooting genre. The game took definite inspiration from a 1989 Capcom game titled Sweet Home, as well as another horror classic entitled Alone in the Dark. Although Alone in the Dark came first in 1992 and was ostensibly the first survival horror game, Resident Evil was the punch in the gut that vomited the term into the mainstream gaming vocabulary. The game's name was originally intended to be Biohazard, something which was clearly paralleled in the name of the franchise's 2017 entry. While Resident Evil continues to be called Biohazard in Japan, it was changed to Resident Evil in the United States due to copyright conflicts with a punk band, as well as an unrelated game which already had the title. Resident Evil's development team was mostly new hires, with some part-time help given by other staff in their free time. For those who have only played the newer Resident Evil titles, the tone and production of the original is a massive culture shock. In the decade since the first game, Capcom's baby has grown into a wildly successful franchise. With that success, the game has been expanded, enhanced, experimented with, and ultimately fine-tuned into the AAA iterations that many know them for today. Resident Evil 1, by contrast, is cheesy. It's campy, it's rudimentary in a lot of ways, and I mean honestly, it's video game B-movie schlock, as it's been described many times. We'll get into what that means exactly and if that's good or bad, but in the meantime, that's the description we'll stick with. So the first thing that hits you when you boot up Resident Evil 1 is a series of live-action FMV scenes. They're grainy, campy, and poorly acted, but they're also fun. They feel like an early Uwe Boll film. As complimentary as that can possibly be, I guess. Now, it was apparent that this approach didn't age well because it was barely used again and never in the mainline series, unless I've missed it so far. This FMV introduces our main characters, Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Barry Burton, Rebecca Chambers, and Albert Wesker. These are all members of a special police unit known as STARS, or Special Tactics and Rescue Squad. What's interesting about RE1 is the fact that each of these characters can be found in the other Resident Evil games, meaning they all survive, canonically, the events of Resident Evil 1. However, the game has multiple possible endings and none of them result in a canonical conclusion to the story. Meaning, no matter how you finish the game, the story is retconned in the sequels. So visually, I was surprised at how much I actually liked the look of the game. The pre-rendered backgrounds look great. Not great by today's standards, obviously, but great in a classic sense. RE1's environments have honestly aged quite well. Because of the claustrophobic spaces that most of the game takes place in, there's no worrying about render distance or other potentially immersion-breaking visual issues that are pretty common of 3D games in the era. The character models and animations, on the other hand, are stiff as a board with rickets, and they are by far the worst part of the presentation of this game. There's a somewhat jarring contrast between the beautiful backgrounds and environments and then the blocky, smudged characters. It's a very noticeable visual mismatch. As an aside, one of the early features of the Resident Evil games are these 3D door opening animations. Every time you interact with a door, you see an opening animation. And I understand that they were primarily included as an alternative to loading screens. And it's clever, it's a great alternative, but nonetheless, having to wait through the animation while going through every door is somewhat bothersome, necessary or not. Although the franchise's visuals would continue to improve, Resident Evil 1 took the liberty of establishing a number of hallmarks that would continue to be used into future games. Ink ribbons are one of these hallmarks. Typewriters continue to be a save device even in modern games, with their most recent feature being in Resident Evil 9. Unlike the newer games, however, to save your game on a typewriter in RE1, you have to use a consumable ink ribbon, meaning you have limited saves. Further, there is no autosave feature in the game. If you sink in a solid 3 hours of play and forget to use an ink ribbon, dying would mean you have to replay every last bit of the game until your last save, and this can be devastating if you're not careful. Now, I'll be honest, I don't really like this system for a couple of reasons, but more or less it all boils down to tedium. Since the ink ribbon is a physical item, it takes up inventory space, which is a very highly valued commodity. The issue with the ink ribbon is that outside of saving your game, they're as useless as a rape whistle in Europe, and you don't want to be carrying them around. So when you find a save point, you have to clear room in your inventory, manually put the ink ribbon into your inventory, save the game, then put the ink ribbon back in the item chest and grab the items you previously removed to make room for the ribbons. The point is, there's more steps to saving your game in RE1 than there are to doing your taxes. Complicating this, it's very common to find these ink ribbons scattered around the mansion, which is necessary so you don't run out, but it's just one more annoying item that clutters up precious space in your inventory.
We need healing accoutrements ASAP. No, I don't need a fucking ink ribbon.
Unrelated to the ribbons themselves, there is no basic retry button or respawn. When you die, you get kicked out into the menu and you have to load into your game again. Now look, I know this wasn't uncommon for the era, and I didn't die enough to make it genuinely that egregious, but it's just one of those quality of life things that I am glad has been updated in the sequels. So let's talk briefly about that inventory space that I just mentioned. RE1 is the origin of the franchise's now classic grid-based inventory. I actually really like this. I'm a fan of it in most of the modern games, and I think it adds some strategy to a system that might otherwise have begun to feel a little mindless. Now, you don't really have to manually adjust and flip items to make room as you do in the future titles, but you do still have to weigh the pros and cons of what you decide to load up with before leaving a safe room because, again, storage is very tight. When you do decide to leave the safe room, you'll want to start making use of the map, which is an essential tool for the first time playthrough. Now, I'm not going to front with you, the map in RE1 is a far cry from future maps. I don't ask that much from a map, I just want it to be clear, easy to use, and a good reference for my progress. Later Resident Evil games and the remakes do a good job of this, whether it's the color coding of locked doors to their corresponding keys, keeping track of items you've left in rooms, or other little bits of information just to let you know what's where after you've discovered it. RE1 isn't interested in most of this. Doors are not color-coded, and there's no indication of what key unlocks which door, meaning you have to remember exactly where the armor door is, or simply backtrack and find it through methodical trial and error. This is really my biggest gripe. I don't love that found items aren't marked, but it's a livable annoyance. Speaking of livable annoyances, perhaps the most dated feature of the game is its controls. So here we are, tank controls. This is the elephant in the room for the first era of Resident Evil games. In short, tank controls simply mean that your character does not move diagonally. Pressing left and right on the control stick or D-pad rotates your character, and pressing forward or backwards causes them to walk forwards or backwards, always relative to which direction your character is facing. These controls are paired with a fixed camera that changes angles as you walk. Likely, these tank controls were just a way to simplify movement and keep it consistent even while camera angles changed. Also, there is the fact that similar 3D games like Alone in the Dark and Tomb Raider already use this control scheme. The point is, there's a reason for the game to control like it does, but I don't have to like it. Now, I played the director's cut of RE1, which includes a little bit of auto-aim for your character. And that's good because trying to shoot zombies in the original is like trying to shoot an apple off a kid's head with a bola gun while blitzed on horse tranquilizers. Of course I exaggerate to an exceeding degree, but there's a reason they updated and re-released the game and then never used the original aiming system again. In the director's cut, as long as you're aimed pretty close, your character will turn towards their attacker and you're free to mag dump. Now, to be fair to the controls, yes, after a while of playing, you do get used to them. They aren't that complicated, and for the most part, they're really not a problem. That is until the boss fights. For those of you who've been beaten by your step-parents or your uncle or whatever when you were young and too small to run, you kind of have an idea of what it's like to fight bosses in RE1. There's one fight in particular that takes place in an attic with crap and boxes all over the place, and it feels very awkward and difficult to try and maneuver away from the boss and then hold down a pivot button and slowly turn around in a circle so you can fire one pathetic shot off before having to pivot around again and continue running. Now technically, I'm sure many fans can beat these bosses without taking damage. In reality, a newcomer's best bet is to just grab a weapon with some real punch and stand in front of the boss, shooting until they're dead, maybe using a healing item if they really need it. And the thing is, the game lets you do it, at least on normal difficulty, so they must have assumed it might be necessary for some losers like myself.
You can't. No! I'm... No. Oh, I think it's dead. Oh.
Now, there's a lot of cope about tank controls. Reddit, not surprisingly, is one of the big spots you'll find this. There are plenty of old heads on there arguing that they are perhaps even superior to regular movement. Now look, in the context of a fixed camera, I'm willing to lend an ear and hear the argument, but in general, as a rule, that's just totally silly. In my opinion, tank controls are like women's suffrage. Yeah, people thought it was a good idea back in the day. You could argue it served a purpose, but we're all sick of it. It aged really poorly, and we'd be way better off without it. There's a reason there are next to no games in the modern day that use tank controls, and no, it's not because they're too hard for Zoomers to learn. The sales figures on Elden Ring, Cuphead, Super Meat Boy, or many other notoriously difficult games demonstrate that people aren't running from challenge, they're running from outdated and mediocre controls. They like getting spanked, they want to get spanked by goth mommy, not Brendan Fraser in The Whale. Now again, I don't find these controls that tiresome, and the game feels totally playable aside from the aforementioned boss fights. I just simply refuse to call tank controls good. What I would call good, though, is the music. Above all, the RE1 soundtrack establishes an atmosphere and it sets a mood. It's haunting, it's melancholic, and it's isolating. Walking through the mansion, you're ushered from room to room while subtly angry and inhospitable strings groan under Chris or Jill's methodical footsteps. There's a lot of variety in the music. Admittedly, because you spend so much time walking the same halls, some of the shorter 1-minute loops do wear a little thin, but maybe the solution is just to get good and do less backtracking. That one's probably my bad. I will say though, the game ends on an absolute rager. Check this one out. As far as gameplay goes, I had a few concerns going into RE1, particularly about puzzles. I tried playing Grim Fandango a few years back and was absolutely brutalized by some of the obtuse and bizarre game logic puzzles that it threw at me, and I was concerned that Resident Evil was going to take out my gaming kneecaps with similar puzzles. Things like, oh, you need to combine the lighter and the paper ball in your inventory to make flaming paper ball, and then put flaming paper ball into statue indent, and statue indent will cast a message on the wall, but only when the blinds are closed. This kind of puzzle logic that happens in early adventure games. I'm sort of joking, but not actually. However, I'm really happy to report that this just isn't the case. Almost everything makes logical and rational sense. There are very few stretches in logic that have to be made, and most of the puzzles are real straightforward. What complicates them is simply keeping track of where all the interactable items or objects are, since, like I mentioned before, they're not tracked on your map. And if you happen to have a full inventory when you find one, you have to go find a safe room, drop off your items, go back to the place you found the item, and pick it up. Usually going back to a safe room to drop it off because you don't know where it's going yet. Okay, so they're not obtuse, they're not ridiculous and unsolvable, but are they fun? You know what? Yeah, they are. All of my previous experiences with Resident Evil, I've consistently been surprised at how much I enjoy collecting tools or items and having that little aha moment in my head, then scurrying off like a little rat to put a crank in a square-shaped hole. Now to be clear, most of this game is puzzles. It's basically like a virtual escape room, and thankfully for the game, and great for myself, I think the escaping is fun. Along your path through the game though, collecting items and pushing bookshelves, you will run into the kids that escaped the short bus, and they will try to kill you, which is where combat comes in. I believe they call it castle doctrine in some states. Now, there's a steady trickle of weapons and rounds you'll get along your run through the game. They all feel unique and different to use, but they're also applicable to different use cases. As monster variety expands, so do ways to take out the monsters. Pistol not working on the tougher kids? Oh, here's a shotgun. Shotgun ineffective? Hey, we're getting rid of the Geneva Convention. Here's a nuke and the world is your Nagasaki. Go to town, or whatever's left of it, I guess. Joking about the nuke, but I'm not joking about breaking the Geneva Convention. One of the weapons is actually banned against use on enemies. The truth about combat in this game is that outside of bosses, it's passable. It's entirely serviceable, and it's not unpleasant, but I don't think fun is a proper way to describe it. The enjoyment is more found in just getting rooms cleared out so that the Down syndrome kids don't molest you
every day for summer.
Unlike some people,
You couldn't avoid them?
you can't actually avoid them, but if you have the ammo, your best option is probably just dropping them like a fat girl's lunch tray. On the other hand, I actually do enjoy how intentional shooting is. You have to hold a button to aim and a separate button to shoot, but what makes it more intentional is that although you can pivot to aim, you're unable to move forward or backwards while aiming or shooting. This makes your shots deliberate and encourages strategic firing positions. Finally, let's touch on the story and characters. Now, for the purpose of this video, I am going to keep it pretty much spoiler-free. If you guys want me to cover spoilers in future installments of the series, let me know, and I can do a whole section on spoiler breakdowns for the story and all the rest of it. But, yeah, we gotta talk about the voice acting.
Yeah, can I have a dozen red roses, please?
Oh, hi, Johnny. I didn't know it was you. Here you go.
That's me. How much is it?
It'll be
Here you
$18.
go. Keep the change. Hi, doggy.
You're my favorite customer.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye-bye.
You ever seen someone talking to a person with a severe physical disability? They're missing an arm, or they have scoliosis or crazy jaundice, something like that. But the person talks to them as if they're severely mentally retarded, even though they're entirely lucid. I think there was a comedian who did a joke about that with foreign languages and talking slower to foreigners as if they're going to understand better. I can't find it, so I can't put it in the video. But if you know what I'm talking about, let me know, because I'm going crazy trying to find this stupid clip. Oh, it's so charming. You don't like it? Oh, of course you wouldn't. You don't understand charm and whimsy. You're a dead inside Gen Z cynic. Yeah, that's true. But, like, objectively speaking, the voice acting is terrible. It's terrible. Listen to these. Just listen to these. If you haven't, just listen to these.
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right. Barry, thanks for saving my life. But Barry, didn't you say you're going back to the dining room to do some research? Why on earth are you here?
I just had something I wanted to check. Now, let's get back to searching for the lost captain and Chris, shall we?
What is it?
Kenneth was killed too. Maybe by this creature. Anyway, let's report this to Wesker.
I'm sorry, Jill.
I didn't know that was going to happen.
Jill, I found something.
Thank you. I'll take this then.
Jill, here's my radio. You should keep it.
No! Richard!
There are scenes in this game where I was completely confused because the vocal inflection of certain line deliveries were entirely detached from what they were intended to convey. Some sound inquisitive when they're meant to sound matter of fact. Hey, I grabbed you a Dr. Bempus while I was out. Thank you. Others might sound sarcastic when they're meant to sound sincere. Hey man, be careful. Those stairs are slick. Oh, thank you for letting me know. I would hate to fall and break my neck. You get the idea. It genuinely feels like the actors were just not given the context of the scenes they were shooting, and it was just sort of their best guess as to what inflection to do. I mean, on top of that, it's just not good voice acting, but the inflection in particular is pretty egregious. I mean, it's either that or the entire cast of this game was autistic, because like an average dialogue exchange in RE1 sounds like an episode of Love on the Spectrum.
If you wanted to hold hands?
Sure.
Oh, interesting.
Okay, let's, do you like nature by any chance?
That is a very good question. I've never really thought about that. I guess I am more of a city person.
To be clear, there's absolutely nothing wrong with finding all of this charming. That's not the argument I'm making. I'm making the argument that the deliveries here are straight up terrible, and I'm also in the right if I say so. This isn't a binary choice with one right and one wrong option, but I'm putting my eggs in the didn't like it basket. Future Resident Evil games would progressively and fairly quickly improve the voice acting, which would suggest that piss poor bad wasn't the intent of the VA, but rather a byproduct of budget, studio's lack of priority on the project, and the times in which the game was made. Of course, the campy B-movie feel will continue to crop up in the series going forward, perhaps most notably in Leon's one-liners.
I have only one very important question. You got a smoke?
Got gum.
Thankfully though, the worst parts of Resident Evil 1, they're more or less left in the past. Future games still have some pretty wooden lines, but at the least actors were given the proper inflection, which makes the stiff delivery easier to stomach. Finally though, let's bring this chopper in for a landing, shall we?
Stop it! Wesker, you're pitiful, and you're gay! Please stop laughing at me. I worked so hard.
Resident Evil 1, the game that started it all. My honest take on this game is that it's just okay. As someone with no truly deep history with the franchise, I like to think I'm not bogged down with nostalgia, and this is a boon to personal objectivity, but it's also a detraction from my ability to overlook flaws, of which there are many in RE1. Frustrating bosses, lots of backtracking, a mediocre map, fiddly controls, severely dated character models and animations, as well as some of the worst voice acting probably ever in a video game, means that there is a lot weighing this game down. In spite of this though, the spirit of Resident Evil is very alive in RE1. Not only the spirit of survival horror, but many of the hallmarks and foundations that continue to be the lifeblood of Resident Evil even to the present day. And, you know, for what it's worth, I enjoyed those things. The methodical investigation of the mansion, the sense of discovery, collecting items, managing my inventory and ammo, solving puzzles, and the chilling, mysterious atmosphere, they all truly work in the game's favor. The fact that I would still tepidly recommend that people experience Resident Evil 1, the original, does sort of indicate in my mind that the pros outweigh the cons, even if ever so slightly. It is a classic, an important piece of video game history, and a very interesting playthrough for those who haven't played it. But that's it. Feel free to tell me in the comments why I am wrong. Or actually don't do that. Tell me why I'm right. Tell me I'm good. Tell me I'm good. Tell me I'm good. Tell me I'm
good. Tell me I'm good. Tell me that was good. Tell me I'm 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 good. Thank you. Is it that hard?
What is happening?